another episode of Coffee and Careers with me, Gail Angus, Careers Manager for the Adam Smith Business School. I'm joined today with my colleague, Fiona Stubbs, who is the Careers Manager for MBLS. Thanks for joining me today, Fiona.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So in today's episode of Coffee and Careers, Fiona and I are going to be asking the question, what is an informational interview and how can you use that to your advantage? So Fiona, let's get started straight away then.
Okay.
What on earth is an informational interview?
Good question. It's not something you hear every day. I think informational interview is an informal chat, and it's a cross between an information session and an interview.
Mm-hmm. So it's an opportunity for you to speak to someone who's working perhaps in an area that you're interested in, or a sector or a job title that you're interested in, and find out what it's like from the inside. So why might someone actually want to do that?
Well, I think you've touched on it, Gail. I think you get an insider's view of someone's job and working in that company. You probably get to hear about careers and jobs that you've never thought of before. And sort of primarily, you're starting to build your professional network.
Yep. So that can be really useful for someone who perhaps wants to think about breaking into an industry that's perhaps difficult to get work experience in. So perhaps, if somebody's thinking about going into something like, say, for example, occupational psychology, but they're still quite early on in their academic career, they might want to actually just speak to someone who's working in that sort of area to find out a little bit more what it's really, really like. Even someone who's perhaps early on in their kind of academic year, so perhaps first or second years as well, this can be a really interesting process if you're kind of at that stage where you are just exploring information. So right back in episode 1 of Coffee and Careers, I was joined by David, and we looked at the DOTS model of career planning, which is a systematic approach to planning your career. One of the steps in the DOTS model is decision making, and that's when you have all your ideas already, but you're trying to think of which one of them is right for you. And I mentioned that actually informational interviewing is a really kind of good thing to do in that step. So if you've got a couple of career areas that you're actually deciding between, actually speaking to people who are working in that sector can be really, really useful insight into that as well. So Fiona, if somebody now is sold on the benefits of doing this informational interviewing, how can they find the right person to contact?
Good point. Well, you need to do your research. My mind, write some lists. Write a list of the companies you'd quite like to work for and a list of the jobs that interest you. And use something like a search tool like LinkedIn or the network and try and find someone that works for those companies or has that job. And ideally, if you want more bang for your bucks, try and find someone that has that job title in your dream job. And like I said, write a list of all those people. Maybe also ask friends of friends or people that you know, because you never know who they might have contacts with.
Yep, so you can use your actual own personal networks, can be a great place to actually
absolutely.
start. The network's actually the University of Glasgow's own alumni tool, and the people that are on the network are what we would call warm leads. So those are people who have identified that they're happy to help students and perhaps happy to be contacted, so that might be a really good place to start. The University of Glasgow's got a fantastic alumni,
really good
that you can really draw on, so those might be good people to actually reach out to, or alum, and actually kind of find out a little bit more from them. Okay, so we've identified that there's someone that we might want to reach out to, so perhaps we've used the network or LinkedIn. How do we then go about contacting them?
Good point. Well, electronic means is the best bet. So write an email and be direct. Say things, I'd like to pick your brains, can I have 10 minutes of your time? And be explicit in what you're wanting, because I think people can become suspicious to an approach like this. They're thinking you're wanting a job. You're not wanting a job. And I would explicitly say an informational interview is not asking for a job, but you're wanting to find information about it. So be explicit. Say that you're just wanting to find information on blah and blah, and also then say why you've specifically targeted that person. You maybe have noted on their LinkedIn that they've transitioned from company A to company B, and you're wanting to know how they made that step, or they're working in a profession that you're interested in, and what happens in their day.
Being specific.
Being specific and transparent.
So being specific and actually flattering.
Yeah, flattering. Yeah, exactly.
Telling them exactly why it is that you picked them rather than somebody else who's perhaps working in that sector as well. And as you said, that can be their career path. It can be that they studied the same subject as you at university and they're in a sector that you're interested in.
Yeah.
But really being specific is kind of key to kind of building that kind of connection and helping that person to see what you actually want to speak for. So then when you're contacting them, you're obviously going to tell them what it is that you're looking to do. Now, doing the informational interview, how would you advise doing it? Would you think face-to-face works best?
I'm always in great favour of doing it face-to-face. I mean, that obviously depends on geography and location, but I think you build real relationships when you're kind of eyeballing someone. If you can't make that and you can't meet them in person, then a telephone conversation at the very least, or a Skype call. But they want to feel the human being behind the approach, not just an anonymous person behind an email. So definitely face-to-face if possible.
And it's important when you're asking that person for that contact that you actually are specific about the time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. These people usually are more senior, that's why you're wanting to meet up with them, and they have busy days. So I think if you can be explicit about the time, maybe say if you've got 15 minutes in your day, maybe at the end of a day, maybe on a Friday when it's perceived to be less busy, and sticking to that.
Okay, so we've managed to be successful. We've found someone on the network that we think's great to reach out to. We've reached out to them and they've accepted their invitation to take them for a coffee. So what are your tips for that informational interview itself?
Well, I think ultimately you've got to prepared some questions. So you don't want to just truck up and have, get all dry. You've got to have some questions like you would do if you're going for an interview. So you can ask questions like, what does your job look like? What sort of things happen on a daily, weekly basis?
One of the questions that I really like, Fiona, is to ask people what might surprise someone about your career or your area of interest. I think that's can be quite an interesting question because it can help you to gain an insight into things that person didn't think about before they actually went into it as well.
I think that's a really positive question, and as you said, it is a surprise, and it gets them really thinking, and it might get some details and dimension that they probably wouldn't have thought. I mean, following on to that, you can ask the classic ones, what do you like, what you don't like, what are the challenges? I think other ones, it's particularly if you're further down your degree, I mean, you might be in year 2 or 3, looking at how they think the sector might, or the job or that company might change in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. So that you're ahead of the game and you're keeping up to date with trends. I think you can also say what might help you stand out in the other applications. So what you might do to enhance your CV. And I think ultimately at the end of any session, and it is a short and sweet session, is you want to ask if there's anyone that they can recommend you to talk or get to know further, maybe even if it's conferences or books or journals or links. I think that's a good way to wrap a session up.
Because quite often people working in a certain company might have people from uni that they still keep in touch with who are working in a similar role in another organisation, and you might be able to build your network through that as well. Yeah,
and it's a small world. I mean, you hear that, but it's not until you start working when you come across people at a conference or whatever that you realise you are 2 degrees separated from people that can make a difference.
Fantastic. So the informational interviews went really well. What's the next step after that then?
Well, I think ultimately before you leave, you obviously at the end of the session you need to thank them for their time, and then as soon as possible, and definitely within 24 hours of meeting, you need to follow that up with a thank you email or even a letter, and connect with them on LinkedIn. And ultimately networking, it's all worth nothing if you don't connect and link after the event.
Exactly. And I would also say just make sure that you keep that person up to date. So perhaps something interesting come up in that discussion that you then go on and do your dissertation on a topic that you think that person might be interested in. Drop them an email later on and actually say, you might remember me, you helped me out, we spoke about this, and I thought you might be interested in, I did this. Or if they've passed you on to someone, Fiona, tell them that you got in touch with them and thank them again for that connection. So maintain that relationship and actually really make that relationship work for you. So thank you very much for joining me today, Fiona.
Thank you.
I hope that we've convinced you of the benefits of informational interviewing and that you will go off and find someone that you can connect with. Remember that you can join the University of Glasgow's network, and you can find that on the Career Service webpage. Next week, tune in to Coffee and Careers, where we'll be talking about strengths and what they are, and how you can identify your strengths. If you haven't done so already, give us a like, comment in the comment section below, and subscribe.